All right, welcome back to chapter 20. Today we'll cover both sections 2 and 3 because they're both pretty short. We'll finish it up tomorrow on Thursday with section 4. Friday, tentatively, right now I have no test planned. So Friday is going to be kind of a catch-up day for you guys. Some of you still have some missing assignments. Grades are 100% up to date as of the 5th at like probably 11:30. I will be updating them and doing tests on today, or so Wednesday. Yeah, I'll be doing tests, and those will all be in. So please, please, please double check, see what you're missing, and get it done Friday or sooner, preferably. So without further ado, section 2. Inspired by the civil rights movement, Latinos and Asian Americans will launch their own movements to overcome discrimination. As Latino or Spanish speaking population from all over Latin America grew in the 1960s, they were denied equal opportunities in education, employment, and housing. And the biggest of these fears would be that by 2050, this increase in population in Spanish speaking neighborhoods would become the majority in the United States, or that's what's projected as. So Cubans in Florida, Puerto Ricans in the Northeast, and Mexican Americans in the West and Southwest became the fastest growing minority group in the United States. And like I said, by 2050, it's projected they are the majority population in the United States. And Mexican Americans, or Chicanos, began to organize in the 1960s against discrimination in jobs, the legal system, and in education. In schools and barrios, or Latino neighborhoods, which we have talked about, which you should remember hopefully, students will demand classes in cultural awareness, better facilities, and Latino teachers and counselors. Now, the reason why they're going to want these Latino teachers and counselors is because it's people they can relate to. Um, I mean, me being from this area originally and kind of knowing what's going on with everybody's lives a little bit more, it really helps me be able to kind of keep an eye on you guys and make sure things are going okay for the most part. And I like to think that you guys are able to open up and come to me if you need help for things because we do share kind of a similar background. Um, and so it'd be the same way for these kids. They want people um, that help them and be role models in their lives of someone with a similar background. So the Chicano movement was led by Cesar Chavez, whose picture is on the right. Um, and he would found the United Farm Workers, which became a labor union, and became a hero for millions of Latino, and Anglo-American farm workers as he worked to tirelessly raise wages and benefits for farm workers and to improve health and safety standards on the job. Um, and so, using nonviolent methods, Chavez will organize a nationwide consumer boycott of grapes and other crops picked on non union farms. And by 1975, Chavez's efforts succeeded in establishing a law that granted the UFW, or United Farm Workers, collective bargaining rights in California that served as a model for other states to follow now. Um, so Chavez's boycott will be very successful in getting the establishment of this union on all farms all across California. And new political groups like La Raza Unida worked for better housing, jobs, and Latino political candidates who would work to pass laws that would benefit the people they actually represented. So you're going to see an increase in representation for Latino Americans in the United States at the local level, as well as eventually working to the national level. But it's a slow start, and you got to start somewhere. So you're going to see a lot of changes locally first before it expands to the national level. And this goes with our core democratic value of popular sovereignty. Now, Asian Americans also joined the battle against discrimination. Japanese Americans formed the Japanese American Citizens League, or the JACL, whose first goal was to work to win compensation for from the U.S. government, um, for massive property loss during the internment of World War II. So they're still suffering because of this, and nothing has really been done to help them. And once they kind of get this taken care of and they start getting some compensation, the JACL will focus on protecting Asian Americans who face discrimination and lower pay and also follow the example of the civil rights movement to push for gains. So once again, they will also remain nonviolent. Now, in 1959, both Alaska and Hawaii will join the Union, increasing the number of Asian or part Asian people in the population of the United States. which will become very, very important as I explain in this next point. Hawaii will send Asian American representatives to the U.S. Senate and House of Representatives, which helped raise the prestige of Asian Americans. And it's going to set a new level of representation for these people, as well as new people to look up to, because now they have representation in both the House and the Senate, which is going to be huge, huge, huge for Asian Americans. And yeah, so believe it or not, that's actually already the end of section two. Moving on to section three, Native Americans in the 1960s also took up the cue from the Civil Rights Movement to work for improvement in their living conditions. Now, Native Americans won't necessarily remain nonviolent, as you will find out. They're going to face unique problems, though, different from everybody else. While they were citizens of their own tribe, they had only been granted American citizenship since 1924. So, up until 1924, they were not American citizens. Now, after 1924, they are both citizens of their tribe and the United States. So, they kind of have a dual citizenship thing going on that's unique to them only. Long denied equal opportunity, they have the highest rates of unemployment, suicide, alcoholism, as well as the shortest life expectancy out of any group inside the United States, which is a lot of things working against them. And though each group has a unique culture and language of their own, most Americans view them as one big group. So most Americans view Native Americans as just one big group as a whole, and not as individual tribes as they see themselves. Um, so that's going to be a big problem for them as well. And continued poverty and stereotypes would lead Native Americans into activism. So in the 1960s, the Seneca Nation was forced to give up reservation land for a federal project. It was to build a dam. And this is going to be in upstate New York, and they're not going to like this. So the tribe will sue, and though awarded $15 million, their lands were not restored. So the courts ruled on side of the Seneca Nation and said, yeah, we violated that treaty to build that dam, but you know what? Here's $15 million. Just go away. We're not giving your land back, which is very unfortunate. Other Native Americans will begin to bring lawsuits for violations of their rights and for failure to make promised payments, but looked for ways to gain national attention. So, yeah, they were having some success with these trials and these lawsuits, but really, they weren't seeing the overall success that they really wanted or needed. And in 1968, AIM, or the American Indian Movement, formed to focus attention on special problems of Native Americans living in cities. AIM leaders would include Dennis Banks and George Mitchell, and this organization represented 20 Native American nations now. AIM fought for autonomy or self-government on matters on Native American lands, and they wanted restoration of lands and racial and cultural pride to be reestablished. A lot of this was taken away in the 1890s. And so AIM would confront the federal government to bring attention to other issues. The Broken Treaties Caravan to Washington, D.C. Was where activists occupied the Bureau of Indian Affairs for 6 days to bring attention to their grievances because they're ultimately being ignored. So they will stage a sit in at the Bureau of Indian Affairs. In 1969, American protesters will occupy Alcatraz Island in San Francisco Bay, home of the famous Alcatraz prison. Um, and they do this because they can claim the abandoned federal prison for an educational and cultural center, which is a right gained under the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1868. However, the action failed, but it did draw attention to their cause. So it would become very public, but ultimately is kind of a failed plan because Alcatraz Island is really hard to get to because of the currents in San Francisco Bay. So it would be kind of a short lived occupation. However, in 1973, in Wounded Knee, South Dakota, Native American protesters occupied the village of Pine Ridge Indian Reservation and refused to leave until the government agreed to investigate the treatment of the Indians and the poor conditions on the reservation. And public sympathy only grew after the killing of two protesters and the wounding of dozens of others, including two federal marshals. So, basically, a little backstory on the Wounded Knee Reservation. Yes, it is the site of the Wounded Knee Massacre, if you guys remember talking about that. But also, um, the government agent in charge of the reservation, instead of giving out the money like he's supposed to that the federal government gives him to hand out, he would kind of just keep it for himself and only give out a small percentage to the tribe. And so, because of this, the tribe living there lived in great poverty. And so, to fix this, They ended up having this occupation, and it will draw national attention. Um, and so um, there will be some things being done now to help out Native Americans. So the government will react to Native American activism. In the 1960s, the federal government tried to bring jobs and income to the reservations. The government promoted leasing of reservation lands to private corporations for the development of energy, but Indians kind of hesitated as they worried about the effect on their land. They were worried about the pollution and side effects of all this. They also moved to cancel and renegotiate these contracts to gain more reasonable terms for the tribe. So they didn't like that the federal government was making the terms for them. They wanted to do it for themselves. Also, the Indians, were included in LBJ's Great Society programs on health, housing, and education that target low-income families. So LBJ did loop them in under his Great Society program. And federal laws favoring Native American rights were passed that would allow the following things: tribal control over reservation schools with the Indian Education Act of 1972, Native American autonomy and administration of federally funded programs under the terms of the Indian Self-Development Act of 1974. Support for tribal control of land, mineral, and water rights grew. 1971, you have the Alaskan Federation of Natives won $1 billion and 40 million acres of land to be set aside for them. And in 1970, the Taws of New Mexico won back the Blue Lake Religious Shrine and 48,000 acres of land that had once belonged to their tribe. So yes, Native Americans were starting to see progress. Was it as much as they probably deserved? Absolutely not. But like with all the other movements, the Latinos, the African Americans, the women, and the Native Americans, even today, they are still fighting for advocacy and still working on trying to get back a lot of the things that were taken from them when we first settled here in the United States. Um, so this is where I'll leave you for section 2 and 3. Tomorrow we are doing section 4. Please make sure you do the Google form attached in the description of this video. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Um, until tomorrow, I guess have a good day and enjoy your time.